The retro shooter, or movement shooter, is now at what many might consider its zenith of popularity. Both the classics and the newer, slicker, turbo-violent games are being celebrated by the gaming community as a whole. Doom being good is one of the few things both boomers and zoomers can agree on. But what's the history of this obscure subgenre for FPS games? How did it go from Doom to Doom 3 and back to Doom? And what is the appeal of it all? Well, let's start with the very beginning, shall we? On the 5th of May, 1992, Wolfenstein 3D was released for the DOS software system. It was inspired by the 1981 Muse software game, Castle Wolfenstein. The game was developed by a relatively new company called id Software, who at the time had only released Commander Keen, also for the DOS. Wolf 3D was the very first 2.5D game, which means that it isn't quite 2D, but it isn't exactly 3D either. It exists in a weird limbo where there are three-dimensional environments, but the enemies, the miscellaneous ammo and health pickups, and even yourself are 2D. Wolfenstein is the furthest back we can accurately recall this genre. It's the senile old grandpa of all shooters. You could even trace Fortnite back to Wolf 3D. The gameplay loop and the story were simple. Monkey shoot, monkey collect keycard, monkey win. And you do this through tank controls and a small arsenal of weapons. It's very clear that the game planted the seed for everything to come. It was primitive and certainly with room for growth, but it was really damn good for the time. But id Software wouldn't just stop at making a good FPS. No. They had to make the best one. Doom was a game that certainly caused an impact. It's so revolutionary it makes me quake in my pants. Plus it's now considered one of the best classic shooters among games like Duke Nukem or Blood. Doom in many ways was a refinement on Wolfenstein. Smoother controls, a bigger arsenal of weapons, more gore, more intricate environments with a lot of more moving parts like elevators, teleportation and switches. Doom was even installed on more computers than Windows, and it led to a chain of successor games and hundreds of developers trying to usurp the throne from it, birthing a whole new generation that improved on an already near-perfect game. PC gaming went from a niche hobby a dozen nerds had to a worldwide phenomenon. Everyone was buying a home computer and playing Doom. Doom Deathmatch became a thing, promoting online gaming, and all of this led to a massive explosion in the boomer shooter genre. We got new IPs like Duke Nukem, Shadow Warrior, Blood, and many more. All of the above were made in the build engine, a more refined and polished version of the Doom engine. All of these games are also more interactive than their predecessors. You can piss, cause a cheeky amount of domestic terrorism, and even vent. Also, it didn't just stop at Doom and its sequel. They were willing to set the bar even higher than they had before. With Quake. It is pretty much just a continuation of Doom but in polygonal 3D. Its code is also used in games today, which is really surprising. Quake was a game that certainly caused a quake in the industry when it came out. Now shooters weren't just about shooting guns and moving fast. They were about shooting guns quicker and moving in them faster. Jumping with rockets even. Faster. So fast that it will propel the industry into a complete 180. What? Now, Half-Life isn't a boomer shooter, but its part in the history of the genre is very crucial to understanding how gaming evolved. Like I said in my last video, Half-Life completely revolutionized the genre by placing the narrative in the center instead of the gameplay. No more text walls and keycards. You no longer play next to the story, you play the story.
Hello, the Cicero. Looks like they are slow.
This, however, also led to games increasing the time it took from booting up the game to landing in a firefight. In other words, Half-Life and its consequences have been a disaster for the boomer shooter genre. Half-Life doomed the genre, causing quakes that would lead to a resonance cascade and a dark age to set upon this once massive genre. At the turn of the millennium, the shooter genre changed. Call of Duty, Halo, and Half-Life sequel were the early 2000s most popular shooters. They dictated the norms of the genre, going from intense carnage and hardcore keycard collecting to paramilitary LARPing and generic, cheesy action movie plotlines. It's not exactly controversial to say there was a distinctive decline in creativity. The games went from every level has a start and an end that are completely unique to that environment, to endless monochrome, narrow hallways. This Call of Dutyfication of the genre would lead to many franchises losing their identity. One of the victims would be our beloved Johnny Bravo lookalike, Duke Nukem, who suffered a fate worse than being left in obscurity, being the main character of one of the worst shooters out there. But that's a whole can of worms we can open up some other day. Oh yeah, a new Wolfenstein came out during that period. It was actually pretty good for what it is, offering a retelling that's slightly more grounded but still offering some good old violence for the sake of violence it's known for. Shadow Warrior was the only one that did a correct transition into this shift in the industry, offering a more unique story than its other peers, even if it was at the cost of replacing the charm of the original Lo Wang, a ninja master and serious OP fighter, who also played around with nuclear weapons for a guy who's into comic books. This somber chapter of FPS history, however, is bookended with a remake of a Wolfenstein 3D copy from the 90s, Rise of the Triad. The original Rot, as it's known among fans, is a cult classic. We all know CB11 is a big passionate fan of it. I mean, he uses one of the OST tracks as his outro music, always has. But his subscribers also know that the 2013 remake doesn't live up to the original, at all. It's way too arcadey and there are an insane amount of performance issues, bugs, map clipping errors, and technical shortcomings. But it's not this game which saved the genre for obscurity, dear god, no. It's the people who worked on it. Some of the crew for this game ended up entering or being related to New Blood, which released some games you may have heard of, like Dusk, A Medieval, Iron Lung, Ultra Kill. Yeah, even Faith, the most recent. You could say that they have a good roster. And all these games, and just a general wave of collective nostalgia that hit everyone in the early 2010s, they made the fast style of shooters hip and trendy again. So, 30 years later, like in many recent events, history repeated itself as Wolfenstein led the torch, but Doom lit the fire. And with Doom, yet again, the popularity of these now called movement shooters exploded. They branched out into two very distinct types. The first one is what I call the evolutions. Those games that expand on the idea of movement/boomer shooters and innovate on those mechanics, keeping the pretty graphics and gore to the highest fidelity possible. The obvious examples from this are Doom 2016 and its sequel, Doom Eternal, which mixed some of the modern shooter cheese with borderline platformer mechanics and enough speed to outrun the Flash. Twice. and the second variation are what we call throwback shooters. These are games that are obviously made today with modern technology and assets, but they have the need to go back and disguise themselves as pixelated, pixel-filled 90s and 2000s PS1 stealth graphics. These games usually have more of a strong artistic direction rather than the evolutions, and it's there to make up for the clunky graphics. And as a personal side note, I'd say in the middle between these two extremes, you could easily place Ultrakill. Yeah, the way it weaves in elements from both the throwbacks and the evolutions just turns it into what I think could be a textbook definition of the contemporary boomer shooter. But yeah, thanks to this big interest in these kinds of games, we don't only have a lot of great games coming out, but we've got great tools for some of the older games. GC Doom has been revolutionary in the sense that it operates as a smoother Doom engine for modern systems. People have made games on it, but the main thing is that you can play Doom in a smooth, modern way. You can even mod it. Hell, you can play the smoothest, best looking version of Chex Quest you could even imagine. It's no longer rocket science like it was setting up DOS, which we should all be thankful for. That sucked a lot. It's weird that this kind of FPS was the underdog for a whole decade, isn't it? Now it's even more popular than the slow, military types. I like to think that this form of turbo violence scratches a unique itch in the most caveman-y parts of our brains. No matter how many real-life accurate rifles, relatable soldiers, or cool military titles they have, they'll never substitute the raw ferocity of going fast and shooting hard. Crawling in muddy trenches isn't the same as soaring through an arena, painting the walls with shades of red and little lumps of flesh. And that's why the boomer shooter prevails after 30 years since its inception. Sure, it isn't exactly front paging on Steam every day, but it has a very, very dedicated following behind it that love to not only try new games, but also learn and start making their own. And the developers are into it, they love their fans. For example, Night Dive Studios, when they were developing a modern sword sport for Blood, they used a fan-made campaign, Death Witch, to make sure that the game was working properly. That's so cool from their part. And that's the video. I'd like to thank literally everyone. Watch Scariest Game or the latest Half-Life game video. Just thanks so much. Yeah, new mic. I think you've been able to notice. But yeah, thanks for the support. I hope it's ongoing and that you like my videos. I'm Roth. I'll see you on the next one. Oh yeah, and before I forget, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.